Thank you so much, Carissa, and welcome everyone. Happy Tuesday. Appreciate you joining us today. My name's Asta, as I was introduced just moments ago. My goal today is to talk about breaking the burnout cycle. So I'm just going to share my deck here. I want to make sure everyone can see that okay. And as we flow through the presentation today, let's just be mindful that everyone's experience with their mental health is unique, and perspectives may be shared here that you may align with, although you may feel like you have had a different experience with your mental health journey. And if that's the case, please save any comments or questions that you may have towards the end. Also, what I will mention before we get into this is there is mention of different statistics and mental health related conversations. So if for whatever reason any of these topics are a trigger for yourself, feel welcome to step out and review the deck at a later time, as it will be shared with your group. So today, let's get into breaking the burnout cycle, and let's refocus on our mental health just as a blanket sort of goal for all of us. Obviously, we'll have personalized goals going into this as well. Before we get into the agenda, I want us to just take a moment and read that quote because for me, it really rings deep into just what self-compassion can do for me, but I'll give you a moment. And what I want us to take away from that is self-care is not selfish. And if you even, within like a 2-minute window can do something for yourself in a given day, just remember that those moments are precious. And over time, enough of those moments can really change the way that we look at life and how we feel about our energy, the way we show up to work, as well as how we show up in our family relationships as well. So here's a brief agenda for today. We're going to talk about what is burnout, how do we define it, as well as dive into some of the signs and symptoms of burnout. We'll then move into some barriers and challenges that we at Advica Health see are very common for members that we help support for their mental health journey. And we'll end up with the positives, which is solutions and strategies that are available to you, not just as a Safe Care BC member, but even generally through the Advica Health program. Whoops, going way too fast there. Give me one sec. There we go. I wanted to start off with highlighting just what the state of mental health is in terms of stats and what we're seeing in Canada. So 1 in 5 of us are going to have to experience personal mental health concerns or may even have a mental health illness that we're dealing with. And that could, require a prescription, or it may not require a prescription. Also, a 2024 study found out that 42% of professionals like you and I are reporting feelings of burnout. And this is way post the pandemic as well. So there was a moment in time where everyone thought that, hey, it's because of COVID that we're feeling this way. But clearly that's still something that's, challenging Canadian workplaces and employees. This one's an interesting one. So for all the women on the call today, twice the amount of women as men experience depression and report higher levels of burnout. So that's something to think about as well, along with the number of full-time employees that have actually quit their jobs due to mental health concerns. And in that, Gen Zs and millennials are the highest category. Now, why I wanted to share that is because we need to understand that this is an issue that impacts all of us, and it's important to put it in perspective in terms of what are the different dimensions that burnout can be characterized by. So the way I like to describe it is 1, 2, 3, which is energy, feelings, and effectiveness. So number 1, if you are feeling low energy or constant exhaustion, that might be a sign and an indicator of burnout. Number 2, if you are starting to notice constant amount of negative feelings about work or life, or maybe both, then that might also be a symptom just to keep an eye out for. And number 3, if you're figuring out that, hey, my effectiveness in my job or the efficacy or productivity of the role that I play, let's say in my workplace or even on a personal level, is not up to the par with what it used to be, that reduction in professional effectiveness might be something that you can characterize with burnout. So again, 1, 2, 3, energy, feelings, and effectiveness. And what is burnout versus what it isn't? And this is important too. So I've kind of laid that out. I'll give you a sec to just review it on your own. And in summary, what's important here is that burnout isn't you being stressed out. It isn't depression that may be unrelated to work. And more importantly, it's not a sign of weakness. So it's not something that we control. It's something that may just happen. And it's important that we recognize it and get the help that we need for it as well. So what burnout is versus what burnout isn't, I wanted to kind of just lay that out as a comparator for everyone's sake. So keeping up with that same theme, how do we recognize burnout, especially if we are the ones that are starting to identify it for ourselves? So a lot of us will notice things like insomnia or sleep disturbances. We may not be having the same quality sleep, or we may be sleeping for fewer hours than we've typically been used to. Addition to that, we may be feeling emotionally drained. So we might feel like our emotional quotient is not really up to the mark. We are starting to notice various different emotions come up for the same type of situations when previously maybe they didn't, along with some physical symptoms that can be quite profound for people. Things like headaches or tummy aches are very common for many folks. Addition to that, you have low energy levels. If you're constantly feeling drained, you can't get out of bed, you're feeling like, even the most mundane tasks are feeling like a lot, that could be what is coming up for you there. And obviously, changes in mood, things like increased negative thought or irritability, that could be towards clients or even colleagues and peers. That might be an indicator that, hey, do I need to take a pause and just look at what's going on for myself? Also, this concept of not being able to control one's responses or emotional moods, that might be something to look out for, along with any sort of lower degree of enthusiasm or motivation in terms of getting your work done. A lot of women actually also report loss of perspective as well as brain fog. They feel like there's this sense of not being able to make a decision and not being able to like look at the big picture anymore. And that might be an indicator that something funky is going on. And the last thing I want to mention there is just this overall feeling of like hopelessness or cynicism, this constant sort of negative emotion about, your work or the impact that you're making is certainly, a sign that you may want to, pause and look at everything in its entirety and be like, hey, like what is going on here? And can I actually take a check on all of these feelings and all of these symptoms? And is it actually burnout that I'm facing? Now, if we're going to try and recognize it in ourselves, it's also important to see if we can actually identify it in others. And that might be a family member, a colleague, a team member, or maybe even, a senior leader within your organization that may be exhibiting these types of behaviors. So for this, there's 4 things you can look out for. One is any change in their organizational effectiveness. So if there's a shift in how they approach their work or the styles in which they work, maybe they were a very organized person before, always meeting, things in a timely manner. Now suddenly they're coming to meetings late, they're missing, project deadlines. That might be an indicator that something is going on underneath that surface. In regards to changes in mood, you may also notice certain outbursts. So someone that has been, a relatively calm, easygoing person now is suddenly displaying emotions of sadness or anger or even just irritability. And those can show up in, various different formats. Maybe they are sending passive aggressive chats in the workplace chat forum, or on video calls, they are displaying a lot of sadness and they're not really engaging anymore. That might be an indicator that, hey, like something's going on with them in terms of their mood and overall well-being. Physical health is also an important one, like we just talked about a couple of minutes ago. And folks may display things like headaches and digestive trouble, or even difficulty sleeping. And if they're reporting any of that outwardly and publicly, then you may want to tie some of those sort of pieces together and be like, hey, like what's going on? Of course, if there is a health issue at play, then that's different. But if there is no sort of physical ailment at play and they're just having all of these, stress headaches, or they're finding like their gut health is not the best, or they're having difficulty, sleeping, like getting to bed or staying asleep, and getting their sort of, recommended amount of sleep, then those might be subtle indicators that something else is at play here. And then finally, noticing any type of pullback. So let's say, you notice that the personality of a typical peer typically is, they're very friendly, very engaging, always taking the lead on a social sort of setup. And now they're pulling back and they're not really enjoying the activities that they once enjoyed. That might also be an indicator that something is going on, and it may very well be related to burnout. So I want to switch gears a little bit here and talk to you about all of those different, dimensions that we discussed just a few moments ago about how we recognize signs of burnout, and, how we can look at it for ourselves on a personal sort of level, as well as, support and recognizing it in others, be it family members, loved ones, peers, etc. And why some people may not even choose to get the help that they should be getting, right? And that leads to barriers to care. A lot of times we find that folks are not getting help for 5 different reasons. One might be wait times. They recognize that they need help, they try to find a service that can help them, but just the waiting period is super long and discouraging for them, that they give up and they don't ask for that help again, or they get discouraged and they don't want to wait that long, so they brush it to the side and then they don't revisit it again. The second thing is just the amount of options that they may have to navigate through, and understanding which one might be the right fit for them. So that can be things like, am I supposed to go to a psychologist? Am I supposed to speak to a therapist? What's the difference between a counselor and a social worker? How can each of them help me? And very quickly, it becomes overwhelming. And then there's analysis paralysis, and they don't do anything at all. So that's another challenge that we've seen come up a lot of times, is people saying, hey, I have too many options. I don't know which one to pick. So I pick nothing and I don't act at all. And I let kind of, burnout take its toll on me. Before we know it, I'm really dysfunctional. The third layer that we've heard from a lot of our members in terms of feedback is related to pricing for treatment. For a lot of times that we've interacted with our members, they've come up with this challenge that pricing for therapy or treatment support is quite high, and they're unable to get that reimbursed for whatever reason through their benefits program, or their workplace benefits doesn't even have psychological care built into it. So that becomes a burden for them to take on a personal level, where they have to pay out of pocket. And often, due to budgetary constraints, they are limited in their access to such treatment options. And then the fourth thing I want to highlight is just the care being out there that is quite depersonalized. So a lot of times members will say, hey, we feel like we're just yet another number. It doesn't feel like this approach is personalized to what I need. It just seems like, I'm calling a person at the call center and they're kind of giving me the run-of-the-mill approaches. It's not really helpful to my circumstance because it's not customized to what I'm looking for in terms of my goals, in terms of my needs, how I want to tackle the situation, etc. And then the last and final one, I mean, I don't really need to, share much on that. We all kind of know and understand how personal as well as societal stigma to mental health in general is a big issue. And when you break it down to burnout, there have also been conversations that we've been a part of through the Advica health team where people have said, oh, we don't even know if burnout is real, and we don't even understand how mental health is such an important part of our overall health until we were able to break away from that stigma. So that's just something to be conscious about. If any of these barriers to care ring true personally to yourselves or any loved ones or even colleagues, it's always nice to understand kind of why people are maybe not seeking care in a timely fashion. And this is just to drive home the concept that just the waiting periods continue to be a major concern for people. This was a report that was released a couple of years ago where just in order to get from your GP to your therapist or psychologist, it was a minimum of 11 weeks. And then psychiatry and treatment is much, much longer than that. So you can quickly see how all of that adds up. And over time, it can be quite discouraging for somebody that was looking for timely support for their mental health issue. So here's the good news. How can we help support you, your family, your colleagues, and peers? We can certainly get you matched with the right therapist for all of your mental health needs. So it could be things like anxiety, depression, any identified mental illness, as well as burnout. If you are finding that, any of those symptoms that we talked about a couple of slides ago are resonating, or it's something that you've been curious about, it would be great for you to connect with a counselor, therapist, and speak to them very candidly about what you're experiencing and how things may have shifted in your life. Maybe there was an event particularly that you can point out to where things may be looking quite a bit different, and you may get the help that you need. The good news is that you have multiple languages that these experts speak, and also a variety of different areas which they specialize in. So as an example, if someone's looking for support with eating disorders for teenagers, that might be available on the platform. If someone's particularly wanting to discuss PTSD or trauma-informed response, then that might be something too that 1, 2, or maybe 4 or 5 different specialists have already had experience in. And then obviously if someone has dealt with burnout before, that therapist might be already a good fit for you. And the easiest way to do this is to register for the platform and then go through a short and sweet questionnaire, which is a matching questionnaire. Through the algorithm on the back end, the system will match you with the best fit therapist that you, would match with in the best ideal situation. And these are based on your answers and responses to those questions. Literally takes less than 10 minutes, but it gives you the ability to get that personalized support that we were just talking about. For those of us that might not yet be ready, let's say for therapy, or maybe are just wanting to explore something that's more self-led on your own time, sort of based on kind of your own schedule, let's say, you can certainly engage with the internet-based cognitive behavioral therapy tool. And that's also built right into the program. And it's actually really well known for things like anxiety and depression. And it does this self-guided programming piece where you don't have to worry about scheduling an appointment. You don't have to, do a virtual call with anybody. You do it at your own time, at your own pace. And over time, you'll find that, symptoms of anxiety or depression have improved. And the last thing I want to highlight on that program in terms of a service offering is the 24/7 support. So once you register through your dashboard, you're able to find this toll-free number that's available 24/7 in English and in French. And you can reach out to it at any point in time for any type of holding support. Now, what do I mean by holding support? Let's say you were going through a difficult time. Let's say a provider interaction or a client interaction didn't land as well, and you're really having a lot of emotions come up for you. You can certainly call that 24/7 line and get support from master's level clinicians in the moment without having to book anything after, without having to do any of your self-led programming. They're there to really just support you in the moment. And if post that holding support, they feel that you may benefit from, let's say, a follow-up therapy appointment or virtual counseling, they will give you that advice as a next step. So you can go ahead and book that as well. Now, the other thing I will mention is 1 hour of therapy for yourself and 1 hour of couples therapy is included in this program. So every user gets 1 free hour of virtual therapy already built into the program. So you really have nothing to lose. If you've never tried therapy before, I really encourage you to try it out. And that 1 hour can be spent, just even exploring different goals and different areas of personal life and professional life that you may want to just improve on, even if you have no symptoms whatsoever of burnout or any other mental health challenges. And the last thing I want to touch upon is just prevention, right? So we always want to think about burnout in two different sort of focus areas. One is, can we prevent it altogether? And the other is, if we do have certain symptoms showing up, how can we get help? So burnout prevention is certainly possible. It's important that you tap into your workplace resources and speak to your team lead or manager if things are looking quite intense for you. Let's say you're unable to manage the workload. So it's a great time to tackle that with your direct manager or your team lead and just really reprioritize things that are absolutely important so that you are not feeling overwhelmed or anxious about that. The second thing is, it's important to fill your cup when you have the time and build on specific habits that are just general habits, right? Sleeping in a timely manner, getting enough sleep, eating right, 80-20 rule, right? Like eating healthy for 80% of times, making sure you're moving every day, and managing your stress better. All of those areas would, counter any of the unhealthy habits that you may have picked up over time. And that ties beautifully into making health a priority, even when you're tired. Something someone very close to me said recently was mood follows movement. And I love that because there are days for sure when I don't even want to go out for a walk because I'm exhausted. But the minute I push myself and do that walk, I feel much better after. So it's just a mindset shift to say, hey, if I'm going to make health a priority, even when I'm tired, even when I'm exhausted, what can that look like for me? Maybe it's not 1 hour in the gym, or maybe it's not, 50 laps at the pool. Maybe it's just a walk around the block. Maybe it's, me planking for 5 minutes while watching my favorite TV show, right? So make health a priority and make it work for you so that you are not building up on anything that's a negative emotion over time, because our physical and mental health are quite tied to each other. The fourth thing is just reaching out to loved ones. And I want to highlight that because loneliness is such a powerful thing right now that we're seeing in North America. So it's very important that we tap into our loved ones, our support system, really our network of friends and family members that will help us get through any of those sort of mental health challenges that we may be finding ourselves in. And the last thing is getting personalized and professional support from an expert. That expert is not your best friend, it's not your neighbor, it's not your partner, and it's not your parent. These are people that are qualified to support you when you need that extra support. Maybe when you're feeling stuck, you're feeling overwhelmed, feelings of anxiety, or even, sadness and despair are coming up. That's when these experts can really support you. And I encourage you to try out a professional therapy session through your 1 hour complimentary therapy if you've never had the ability to do that yet. If you've already registered on the platform and you've been using it, kudos to you for taking charge of your mental health. But if not, take this as a reminder to go ahead and register for that platform. And like we were discussing earlier, if you have any questions or need some support getting set up, you can certainly reach out to us and our team will support you in getting all set up. We're not going to have time to kind of open up the floor for any commitments, but I want to leave you with this is, what is one thing that you are willing to do to support your own health and mental well-being from today's session? Would it, include anything that's mental health specific? Could it be better stress management? Could it be, having a balanced approach to work? whatever it is, I want you to leave away with that one commitment. And if it is just a commitment to register on the platform, then great, that works too. I would love to see most of you engaged and using the platform to your benefit so that you have the mental health support that you deserve. For any burnout concerns, please reach out and register for that mental health on demand service. It is available to all Safe Care members. And if you run into any concerns getting set up, please email us at clientsupport@advicahealth.com. I will close off with that and we'll open up to any questions that people may have. I'm seeing 3 submitted. How can you help a coworker exhibiting burnout? That's a great question, and I'm hoping that some of the pieces that I mentioned are maybe signs that you're noticing in a colleague. Talking to them just on a personal one-on-one basis is always a great idea, and reminding them of the different services that they have access to if they feel ready to reach out for that support. That might be another idea to consider. What I will say is you want to be mindful of is if you're someone that's observing certain signs, it's not okay to blast it out on a team level or kind of go above and kind of, report it to their manager because you just don't know what might be going on for them, right? So we want to be a little bit mindful of that and just have a one-on-one conversation with them to make sure they're okay. Like a check-in. How many of these signs have to be present to be considered if you're burnt out? That's a great question. And it isn't a clinical diagnosis. Burnout is not something that, a psychologist can kind of go down the list and be like, okay, if you have, let's say 5 out of these 10 symptoms, then I can, diagnose you as burnout. But that being said, you obviously are being self-aware and intuitive enough to understand that, okay, if you have, let's say, most of these symptoms, then the chances are that you may be experiencing burnout. And the best way to, get that support and figure out a toolkit for you is to reach out to a therapist and speak to them and understand, okay, what are the next steps and where do I go from here?